The United States Supreme Court has just announced one of the biggest, one of the most influential, one of the most important Supreme Court cases, honestly, in the last decade. This is a really, really big deal. Had this case been decided, I don't know, 5 years ago, we would have seen a radically, radically different country today. This case is called Bost versus Illinois State Board of Elections, if you want to look it up. And essentially, in a 7-2 ruling, this is not, a 5-4, 6-3 type of thing. No, this is a 7-2 ruling. Oh, by the way, Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented. They decided that a candidate has standing to challenge state election laws. This is a massive deal. A massive deal. I know it sounds nerdy. I know it sounds geeky. But if you are really any type of American, normally I say if you're a gun owner, if you're any type of American, this will affect you. This is a huge, huge seismic shift in the way elections will be conducted going forward. Essentially, the way it worked before, candidates weren't allowed to challenge unfair election rules. The reason for this is they weren't considered to have standing. They weren't considered to, under the Constitution, have a sort of special interest in challenging this lawsuit, right? That's kind of how standing works. So when President Trump went around in 2020, suing a lot of these states for sort of unfair practices related to the 2020 election, and again, I'm not saying it's stolen or not stolen, but the reality is what ended up happening was those cases weren't decided on the merits. They weren't decided on whether or not, something fishy had actually gone on. No, they were decided on the fact that he didn't have standing as a candidate to challenge elections. This changes that. This completely reverses that paradigm. This flips over that table. This is a really, really big deal. There is a very real possibility that this Supreme Court case will win or lose a presidential election in the next 20 years. That is how important this is. In fact, this actual case involved an Illinois law, which, I kid you not, allowed votes to be counted 14 days after the election. Mail-in ballots to be counted 14 days after the election. You and I both know that's ridiculous. The only reason you would allow something like that is fraud. I mean, let's just be clear. The reason you would allow that is fraud. That's just the reality. The reason a lot of our voting laws exist is also fraud. There's no way you can tell me that voter ID is not a common sense piece of legislation, right? And we do not have it. The UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was denied voting because he did not have an ID on him on the day of the election. The way elections should obviously work is on election day, none of this 6-week early voting stuff. No, on election day, you turn up with your ID, you present it to the person, you vote, and you leave. That's obviously how it should work. You know what? Make voting a national holiday. Cool, whatever. But on voting day, you should have to turn up with an ID and vote. Obviously, common sense. Before, you could not challenge rules like this just because you were a candidate. You weren't considered to have, any special sort of dog in the fight. Now you are. And that opens up a world of litigation, right? This is great for lawyers. I mean, lawyers are the happiest people, in the world after this, right? This opens up a world of litigation around elections. And it should. The way that elections work in the U.S., of course, is that they're delegated to the different state electoral commissions. That's a really, really weird system. It makes sense historically, but it's a really, really weird system for the modern era. And because of that, Democrat states obviously adopt voting policies that are, shall we say, a little bit more friendly, right, to Democrats. And Republican states adopt voting policies that, in my opinion, are fairer, but are more friendly to Republicans, right? So Democrat states will allow, let's say, a lot more early voting and a lot more of this sort of screwing around like in Illinois. That's part of the way the cookie crumbles, right? That's like gerrymandering. It is legal. It's a little bit shady, but it is legal. This lets you challenge it, and never before were you able to do that. And yeah, this is primarily a Second Amendment channel. Of course it is. That's not changing. But the reality is people in the Second Amendment do not pay enough attention to these cases. This case could decide whether an AR-15 ban, gets floated in Congress. Or could decide on a state election if someone wants to, declare, moving envoy is a sensitive place, and now, boom, you're a felon. That's honestly the stakes that are at these sort of Supreme Court cases. That's what we're dealing with here. And I think a lot of people in the Second Amendment movement do not understand this as a sort of principle. All of our rights touch all of our other rights. That's how it works in American law, right? If we change one thing, it changes everything. It's a massive spider web. And this will 100% affect your Second Amendment rights, 100% affect your First Amendment rights, and somewhere down the road, it will affect who is the president, not just who wins a Congress seat. This will affect who is the president. If you think back to 2020, there is a very real possibility that with this Supreme Court case having been decided, let's say in 2019, that we would have had Donald Trump as president and someone different, right? Because it wouldn't have been Biden and it wouldn't have been Trump because it would be his third term. Someone different in 2024. The country would have changed forever. And the country will change forever because of this. It is a genuinely seismic case. I know it sounds nerdy. I know it sounds geeky. I know it sounds like, cool, they changed the standing rules to deal with, election suing. What's the big deal? This is a really, really big deal. And the Supreme Court has got this right. So a lot of the time in the Second Amendment also, we get all jumpity, right? Why haven't they done an abortion ruling? Why haven't they done a Second Amendment ruling? Why haven't they done a, death penalty ruling, if that's your issue? Why haven't they done a, Eighth Amendment? Why haven't they done a Fourth Amendment? Why haven't they done a First Amendment ruling? It's because there's actually so much for them to deal with, and it actually does affect all other parts of the law. You can agree or disagree with me on this, but this is as impactful to the Second Amendment as, not necessarily NYSERDA versus Bruin, but as Hamani would be, right? Hamani is the unlawful user case, right? Sorry. But yeah, this is as impactful as that because this could cause Congress to just reverse the rule on that. We might not even need Hamani, right? We might not even need, Duncan versus Monta, right? This could just cause Congress to act on these things. And that's why in the Second Amendment, we need to pay a lot more attention to things like this, to cases like this, because they are genuinely the motor. This is genuinely the motor that moves the Second Amendment forward. If Trump hadn't won, let's say in 2016, and he had needed to sue, and he couldn't have, we wouldn't have NYSERDA versus Bruin. We wouldn't have any of the Second Amendment stuff that the Supreme Court has given us over the last, 5-10 years. And we'd be in a much, much worse position. And so the reality is, at some point, this will be used to protect our rights. At some point, it will be used also in the other direction. But that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. I'd like to know what you guys think, though. Do you agree or disagree? Do you see where I'm coming from with this? I think it is genuinely as important as I've laid it out. I don't think I'm exaggerating it at all. But I don't know. You guys let me know. Anyway, guys, I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, please subscribe down below if you're new. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.